So with our handsome Mr. G, I know you were mentioning that Gus is still having some trouble with practicing some of his walking skills. So obviously, like we discussed a lot of times in class, there's moments where puppies are having developmental stages or phases where, their bodies are growing and changing. And then because of it, their gaits can get a little bit messed up as well, not in a bad way, but awkward. So there could be moments where for him, I know you're mentioning that he would take a few steps and then you'd have to lure him again. So I do find that sometimes maybe take it where there's few steps you do take and then you feed. I know you're mentioning he kind of puts the brakes on and kind of just sits down and kind of gives up. Those could be moments where I know we were sort of quickly discussing it this morning using toys. I know you had mentioned he did end up having the towel that you had on your walk, and then he was able to handle that and hold it in his mouth and then continue on his merry way. I would make sure though that when you are practicing, if those items would maybe be better to, of course, we mentioned, a dog toy, a tuggy, maybe have something that's new that could motivate him to do some forward motion. So like, for example, I like having some handheld toys that we've talked about in class where we could get some engagement and some honing in on me as the handler while I'm walking. And then as he's doing some good little steps, we might go, yes, and then go into some play. So obviously too, when we are practicing with the puppies, we want to be careful that we're not doing too much too fast. So what I mean by that is, like, for his age group and maybe his comfort range, maybe a few minutes at a time in the driveway or on your little area that you're practicing in would be enough. For some pups, trying to take them for a big walk, even if it's 15 minutes, could be a little challenging. He's like, my girlfriend is singing. He and Miss P got to do a little bit of playtime earlier this morning. So when it comes to your babes, we do want to make sure that if, let's say, toys might be more motivational. Right now he's saying food is much cooler. So it could be, again, working up that toy drive and then maybe being able to hold something while practicing some of that loose leash walking. So for some puppies, certain items are more valuable than others. So we might find like a bumper toy. He might really enjoy holding one of those. Right now, he's just in food mode, which is fine. So I'm going to just get his attention. So let's say, for example, he'd rather work with food for right now versus the toys, because he says, no, hold on, we got to check it out. So if, for example, food is at times motivational, which is great, we want to just make sure our timing is on par. So what I mean by that is if the food is, for example, sometimes only given while the puppy is either stationary as opposed to in motion, your puppy might start to think that what you're looking for is a few steps and then a pause. So a lot of times as I'm playing with him and working, I'm also feeding several snacks while we're in motion. So I know we tend to slow down and then feed, but I'm trying to get him up and still be moving while we're practicing. So he's going to go grab a little drink of water. And silly me this morning, I completely forgot to bring one of the pieces to my microphone set. So thankfully, my husband was able to drop it off for me, but I'm a little bit behind on typically my schedule for filming. The babes have still been practicing, but of course now I'm in a mad dash to get all my filming in before it's pickup time. So Gus, I'm just going to do a lovely little name recognition right there, feed him for that. So if your loose leash walking consists of him, putting a lot of the brakes on, you may find too what can be helpful is some of my students have had much greater success on sometimes a little bit of a longer leash. And then you can include exploration, play, and frolicking throughout your loose leash practice. So if, let's say, your puppy tends to do not necessarily a straight line, sometimes the nice thing about a longer lead is your pup can then meander, but you're still all walking in the same direction. And of course, that's for safe environments, so if you're right by a roadway or there could be unexpected distractions, then obviously having the 6-footer is just fine. We're just doing a couple little find-its to keep him intrigued. So, but when practicing with the loose leash walking, you guys may find that if stepping outside is still just so hard for him, keep outside for maybe some practice with toys, for going to the restroom, for working maybe a little bit of engagement from the environment. And then maybe I know that you mentioned like the driveway area where there's less grass to get distracted with. That might be a great moment to transition some of these skills onto those bubbles. So like right now he's doing a real nice job. So it could be also a little bit of where, For me, he has no previous experience other than the things that we have been doing. So for some puppies, if we are very gray, so what I mean by that is sometimes we reinforce one thing, then we don't reinforce it, then we ask it in a different manner, or we change up the environment in which we're first practicing. A lot of puppies have a hard time generalizing skills. So a lot of students will say, well, they do so well in this bubble, or they do so well with this setup. And this is where it's very normal that your puppy takes a lot of repetition and practice to figure out certain skills. So with Mr. G, he's like, I've just noticed there's lots of cool things on the snack and treat wall. There we go, good job. So ready? So, but anytime he sort of goes and meanders a little bit further from me, I want him to start thinking again, there's still all that great value of coming into my space. Oh, he says, I'm exhausted. What a good job. We were playing a little bit earlier too with his friend, but then he was also doing some play with the flirt pole. So with the loose leash walking, some tips I would try is have special toys he hasn't seen. Maybe you keep them for engagement when you're training either in the house or outside of the house or both. You may want to also have maybe try the longer leash and see if sometimes having him practice bouncing back and forth between maybe you two at home. You could work like the recall game where maybe you say his name and he goes back and forth between you and your spouse. And you guys could take turns working between everybody. So if your daughters are home, I believe you said daughters. Sorry if I messed that up. But you could have him practice. So like even with me, I'd send him away for a snack and then I'd go, Gus, come. And I could work that little recall, but you could be doing this name recognition or the recall as well between both of you. So you could do this in the home where there's minimal distractions and then practice this on a longer training leash outside between both of you, like in the driveway or somewhere that you've deemed kind of safe. That could also be a way to start building that engagement into your space is again valuable and kind of fun. Where a lot of times if the environment is more stimulating and more enriching than what we can offer, we may by accident get him to enjoy that more than sometimes checking in with us. Ready? Gus, come. That was beautiful. So definitely gauge also, have some of his needs been met? So like if let's say he is maybe really pooped out because he didn't take that great nap, and I know we're going to dive into some of that quiet time for him too. So if let's say Mr. G didn't do the greatest job taking a better nap throughout the day, he could then be a little bit overtired come the afternoon or evening. And that might be where he then has a harder time focusing or honing in or taking little breaks even while moving around in the different outdoor and indoor environments. Nice job. So right now I'm also just feeding for this beautiful little check-in. So he came into my space. I'm using kibble mostly with a couple of his training treats. And I'm feeding for this nice little moment where he's settling near me. And then what we'd end up doing though out in the real world is remember that if you've been using the same training treats inside and then you use the same ones outside, the value behind the food might go out the window. So what I mean by that is if we're using, his usual typical nice trail mix, and he's been earning that inside with minimal distractions for doing some great check-ins or doing some puppy push-ups, then we go outside and we use the exact same paycheck, he may not find it valuable the way he did while he was inside. So if let's say that was like pennies on the hour and then we step outside, it doesn't seem as valuable because the environment is so much more stimulating or overwhelming. So sometimes maybe you step outside and maybe you use chicken, or maybe you use some new training treats he hasn't had yet, and you try some of those bad boys outside where you're trying to create more value in working harder, which means to come check in with you versus the environment. So if sometimes the value of the paycheck is not enough, the work may not be there from his end. So right now I'm just capturing little moments where he's nice and relaxed and vegging. He's doing a really good job hanging out. So but he's getting tired. It's almost time for his little nap time shortly. We're going to do a few more fun little skills with him. But I would also make sure that if right now the goal is to go from point A to point B on a walk, even if it's small, I would almost recommend to not really have a goal, and sort of lower the expectations to a certain extent, because since he is so little and now the temperatures are going up, obviously too, for safety for paws, make sure that when you're trying the asphalt or pavement or concrete, that when you're touching it, you can handle the temperature on your hand or your foot for at least 5 seconds or more. If, for example, you can't, then a lot of times the asphalt and pavement or whatever is really unsafe for their pads. They may not respond, but they might actually end up by accident burning their pads, and then sometimes it can peel. So we want to be really careful as the summer weather starts hitting us a little harder eventually, because even on a nice 60 to 70 degree day, the asphalt can become very hot. So just be cautionary there for safety for feet. Good job, sir. But for that loose leash walking, you guys may also find maybe the breadcrumb trail could be an option, which we kind of brought up in class. I'll see if he's interested to give it a try. So with the breadcrumb trail is as you're meandering and your puppy is walking with you, as opposed to feeding them directly, you'd feed the floor. You could, if let's say he was taking a moment where he's slowing down, put a little crumb and then get him to move forward this way where he goes to the target of the food on the floor. Eventually, this would be faded out, and you would just be feeding your puppy as they come into your space and feed them with your hand. Nice. Good job, sir. So, but if he's ever especially wild and he's sort of mouthy or he's jumping up, I like doing the breadcrumb trail because it helps him have a low target, which doesn't create more of this jumping up to reach you halfway. And then it also helps them sort of slow down. If let's say they're really going quickly through the environment and kind of trying to pull this way or that way, this can also slow them down and help them sort of take those little breaks in between each little interval. Nice. So right here with the breadcrumb trail for some puppies, that can be immensely helpful. The other option too is sometimes allowing him to get cozy, nice job, Sarah, in the bubble you're going to practice. So obviously in class, they are coming, like for the doggy day school and sometimes for the other group classes, is they're coming and they're mostly getting comfortable in their little space, or when he's here on his own working with me, he'll then get comfortable with this bubble that we're going to train in by going and sniffing, by playing and exploring. And then from after exploring it and getting comfortable with it, nice job, sir, then we'd go into working focus. But stepping out into a new bubble and expecting focus right away is probably not super realistic. I would recommend stick to a zone where you'd like to practice, allow the puppy to do some decompression play, exploration, find it. Then from there, see if you can work on focus back into your bubble. Because if we start with focus work first, remember your puppy sees his whole world through his sense of smell. So if he cannot first figure out where he's going, he's almost walking into the environment blindfolded, and then he might even have a harder time with his impulse control or his comfort range or his attention span. So I definitely make it where it's first a few, maybe 5, 10, 15 minutes of just hanging out, whatever gauge or sort of time frame he does well with. And one day it might be shorter, one day it could be a little longer. But then from there, then see if you can work some of that honing back in on you and checking in. So I just also will break up snacks throughout when I'm blabbing, because some of the training treats, I just make them even smaller than they are. So right here, he's been doing a real nice job. I know he's getting a little tired, but we're gonna see if we can get him up and wiggling. So again, you guys may wanna just see if you can hone in a little bit more on this at home where it's not as hot, as it's getting warmer outside. See if you can get the dance moves a little bit more finessed and then bring out those dance moves to the real world. Definitely keep me updated too on his comfort or progression. You guys could also, I'm not saying you have to, but I do recommend this to a lot of my students, is film part of your practice so then I can see what you guys are up to, and then I might be able to also perceive what Mr. Handsome, Mr. G is saying. Because a lot of times people will say, well, oh, the dog was doing this and that. And I'm like, okay. But it's hard to really see without having that visual and interpreting what might be going wrong or right. So I find videotaping even my own practice sessions with my dogs, because then I start to notice, okay, well, I was doing this and this is where my dog got confused. So a lot of times even filming, just again, you don't have to keep them. You could just film and delete them as you go. But it can be really nice because it's hard to see yourself while you're doing something and then see things down the road if you are already done doing it. So the benefit of filming is you can go back, video obviously, and go back to the video and see, well, where did we have our communication breakdown? Where are things going amazing? And then go from there. What a good job, sir. But definitely don't forget about all the resources in the sense of videos that were also sent along in the beginning for the puppy kindergarten classes too, because there's some great videos on helping with, loose leash walking, as well as building, engagement. And then there's some great videos on also if you're having some difficulty, like with him settling in a space, just that way we can make sure that what we're working on from my end, from yours, and from those extra videos are just more helpful ways to set him up for greater success and be able to build up his like safe alone time. So, but Mr. G is rather tired, so I want to dive into some other skills with him before he has to go take his nap. And he's doing a real nice job with that loose leash walking. So again, it could be a little bit of operator error and puppy confusion put together, and it's enough to throw both of you off. So don't worry if it's not perfection. You're looking for progress. So if you're really having a rough moment, maybe film some of the ways you guys are practicing. You can send them to me, and then I can sort of evaluate, where are things going amazing and where there could be that confusion again for the handsome man or for you guys. But splendid job. We'll give Mr. Handsome a little breather from this loose leash walk-in practice, and we'll do a little bit of some other goodies.